Last week I was here, and not last week, a week before the last, and we spoke about the Eve eating the fruit. And we were talking about what happened after that, and one of the key conclusions was like, Eve was deceived and Adam renounced God. And we concluded that sin was the renunciation, the denial of Adam from denying God, renouncing God. That's essentially at stake. Now, the same passage in the Bible also give us other aspects. So let's get in there and see what it says first. So in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verses 16 to 17, which my sister read, and I would like somebody to read it for me if you have it open. You can just read it loud. Does anybody?
And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. Am I on the right one?
Yes, 17 as well.
But
Yeah.
of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die.
You shall surely die if you eat on that fruit. And last week, 2 weeks ago, we know that we definitely ate the fruit. And God said, you should surely die. The problem is, nobody died. So my question was like, how come God is saying you should surely die? Eve just touched it, ate, and even gave it to the husband and didn't die. In fact, Adam lived for almost 900 years. Yeah, they lived almost 1,000 years. So, and also another thing is like, yes, God said you should surely die. That was a sentence for the whole humanity, right? But even in the Bible itself, even before the flood, not everybody died. Guess what? One of them never tasted death. Remember who? Enoch. Yeah. Yes. So how do you reconcile this? You shall surely die, because of Adam's sin, we all took the sinful nature and we were condemned to die. Everybody, human family. But even so, in this state, we have several people that never died. Yeah, most of us died, but that breaks the rule, right? So that's why I like to really most of the time we have sermons, it's just like, but I really like to go into that because God said, come and let's reason together. So my question is, why, God? You say you should surely die. What death are you talking about here? Because definitely human beings up to now, some of them defy that rule. So either you are not telling us the truth, or you are probably referring to a different kind of death. Now, why do I say that? Because we know the death that we are familiar with is with, I don't even want to go into, because we all know, right? We know the death that even Jesus himself referred it as a sleep in many stages. Jesus died and everybody died, so we're familiar with that. There's a lot of theory about death. Like today, this is a topic that it can take us in a whole different directions. We can start from philosophical point of view, we can start from psychological, biological, whatever. There's a lot of theories. In fact, even in the news, every time there are people saying, people having near-death experience. Oh, when you die, you go this. Oh, I saw the light. I was going through the tunnel. And there's a lot of theory. We could talk about it, but unfortunately, we don't have time. And also, not only that we don't have time, but it's also not beneficial. What we can do for sure is talking about what the Bible speaks about it. So let's not use human secular understanding, and let's try to dissect this topic as far as we can go based on what the Bible shows us, the evidence. Now, the other thing we need to understand first is, what is the opposite of death? Because you cannot talk about death without knowing the opposite, right? The opposite is what we are doing here. We are alive. It's life. Life, So you cannot have death without having primarily, without being existing, without having life. And the only problem about it, understanding life, as we know from human perspective, is very limited. To really fully understand what life is, you need to understand the life giver, the one that we sang, immortal, invisible, and God only wise. That's the only being that the Bible says that has life in itself. In fact, Jesus said, I am the life. You're not the life, my brother. Our life is dependent. It was given to us, right? But him, Jesus, he was not given life. He is. Remember, last time we defined love, right? God is love. That's a definition. Jesus is life. No, it's not like, it's not saying, Jesus didn't say, I have the life. He didn't use that verb. He said, I am. He is life. So if we want to understand what it is, you need to go in there. The problem is that put us inside into the Godhead, the divine Trinity. Again, that's another complex situation that our brain is not capable to understand fully, but we have a little insight. How does life flows within that triangle? The prerequisite for life existence is love. God had, you see the triangle that we spoke, the Trinity, Father, Holy Spirit, Son, they are bounded in love, right? You have to have love. And the love, the representation of love is based on the objective. How do you see love? Jesus said, by actions. And those actions is measured on a principle of moral principle, the Ten Commandments, right? So if you do the if you follow God's commandments, you are following the requirements of love. And those are the things that make life possible. The opposite of love is hate. What does hate do? Kill each other. Simple. If I hate you, I'm very close to, even Jesus said, if you hate your brother, you're already a murderer, right? But if I love you, then I want you to live, right? You see those parallel. So those are the prerequisites. But obviously we know that our parents, they broke that circle, that thing. So, and then God said you should surely die. So they brought death. But the complex situation we're dealing here is like they didn't die right away. I really honestly had a problem with this when I first time started reading. I like, you said you're going to die, but they didn't die. They live 1,000 years. Until I started studying medicine and I learned from biological perspective that death is a process, biologically. Even a cell that is died just doesn't die like that. Death is a process. It's just a series of failure of cellular mechanism until everything fails. Even as now, we have a lot of death process occurring in our body. Like cells that are dying, thank God, there's some cells that are regenerating and coming, but it's a constant process of life and death cycle taking place in our body in a succinct form. So it's a process. Nothing just happened like this. So indeed, the time they ate the fruit, death has happened quickly, right? So we can see the spiritual death that happened. They lost a lot of things that would protect them from the environment. For instance, the light, the clothes that God gave them made them, immune to radiation and all these things. They could see other words and stuff like that. But now God took that out. They started feeling cold and warm, and we were prone to pain and all these toxic activities that kills the body. And obviously that's a process. It takes time until you really die. But then, as you move on, especially the best way to understand this process is understanding what Jesus, the life giver, actually speaks about it. Because in many passages, I actually have it here, but it's just so many passages. He just speaks in a lot of places that he himself referred to death as a sleep. Like when he was going to resurrect Lazarus, he said, Lazarus, my friend, is asleep. Let's go and resurrect him. And all that. Now, what is sleep? We all know. we sleep every day. The difference is the death that he was referring is like a sleep with the complete absence of consciousness. Obviously, when we sleep, we lose consciousness. There's some kind of interval in between that sometimes you have a little bit of consciousness, you wake up and but in a deep sleep, you are completely knocked out, right? The absence, the complete cessation of consciousness. That's the death he mentioned mostly. And he also says something about this type of death. He said, don't worry about that. So Jesus, in another word, he downplayed the death we are scared about. He said, don't worry about that. You're just sleeping. That's normal. So that's surely is not the death that in the beginning God will say, you surely die. I mean, there's a lot of like, if you want some sources, I can go over the Bible in many places, right? So, yeah. Now let's go back a little bit more in the death as a process, right? And a little bit more, because I jumped in the life essence, right? God is the life. We already understood how he works. Now, how did he make man? How did he give life, right? So he took the dust, make Adam, and then breathed it into the nostril, and man became what? A living soul. All right. How does it happen in a death? The first thing that happens is you exhale, and then you decompose. What happened first in the creation was you have the body, and you breathe the breath of life. Don't confuse that with ventilation. Guess what? Before man was created, the animals were created, and animals, they breathe, right? So that breath of life, and I'm not saying that's a soul either, that's a virtue that came from God, because man creation was the only different form, was a special way. God did completely differently from what he did in the rest of the 5 days, right? And even the language was different, right? We're not going to go into that. So, yes, life is dust, air, living soul. Death is air back to God, dust back to the ground. And that's what has been happening, right? It's the reverse of creation. That's death. All right. However, God, Jesus Christ, downplayed that. What type of death he wants us to pay attention the most. So let me bring you some pages here, one moment, of what Jesus really meant of death, that we should be careful. So in the 2 Thessalonians, page 9, chapter 9, chapter 1, versicle 9. Oh, my goodness. Right, they say, they will suffer punishment of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his light. Another page, another biblical verse that I want to refer is Revelation 20, verses 12, that say, and I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they have done. And it keeps on going. Like there's a lot of chapters that I have here that speaks about the type of death that God wants us to be concerned, that really, really matters. That's the eternal death. And let's dive in this one a little slow and understand, because this is where the problem really, really is. It's not the sleep. We all can go to sleep. The problem is, because if this death was that important, you wouldn't need the second death. Why there is two deaths in the Bible? It's because the first one is just, you know, a step for the real death. And let's understand what it is. Now, seeing the Revelation, it say, oh, I saw the dead, and the dead was judged. How can you judge a dead? It is dead. He's not thinking. But obviously, you see how they downplay the first death as something less meaningful than the second death. Now, the point is, what is the second death? What is this death that God says you're surely going to die? Let's see that. To understand it very well, let's go to Jesus, who is the one who actually experienced the second death while on earth. Did you guys know that? Okay, let's see. Back again. God is life. God gave life. And we are living being. Right? So that means if your life is dependable, you can't survive away from the source. You need to be next to the source so that you can continue to be alive, because you don't have life on your own. Simple. Even as of now, and based on the concept that the death is a process, right? Even as of now, when you are far away from God, how is your life? Misery. Depression kicks in. You start doing mostly self-destructive things. Yeah. If you're far away from God, you're going to do mostly violating the law, which is self-destruction, which is death in itself. It's just a process. You start taking drug, alcohol, and all these that we in medicine we call risk factor. At the end of the day, it will kill you. But if you are with God, you'll do things that will self-preserving, right? You'll not drink alcohol, you'll not smoke, you'll try to do what God tells you, which is good. So you need to stay close to the source of life. Oh, so what is eternal death? Eternal death is the complete separation from the source of life. God complete separation from you and me. That should be the most fearful thing. And you might be like, bro, what are you talking about? What is this? Like, the thing is like, remember, all life forms, including Satan, up to now, is still benefiting from God's mercy. Yep. Because God, although we were supposed to die, the reason why we're here and breathing is because even though we're not worthy, He's still giving for free His virtue, His protective care, right? So even as the worst, even when you are asleep, God is somehow there for you. Although you've departed from Him, He's still giving you for free His life. But the point is, eternal death is when God completely will separate you, Himself from you. And let's see that in Jesus' life, so that it's not just Brother Nelson's word. In the book of Desires of Age, remember, Jesus had all good life. I wouldn't say good life in a sense of human life, but I say in the sense of relationship with His Father. He was always there for His Father. But then suddenly, after He came into Gethsemane, like Hosanna, and then few hours after, He went into a deep mystery agony, right? Let's read it. Desires of Age, page 74, say, but God suffered with His Son. Angels beheld their Savior's agony. They saw their Lord enclosed with legions of satanic forces. His nature weighted down with a shuddering, mysterious dread. There was silence in heaven. No harp was touched. Could mortal have viewed the amazement of the angelic host as in silent grief they watched their Father separating His beings of light, love, and glory from His beloved Son, they would better understand how offensive sin is in His sight. Still didn't get it? No worries. I'll read it a little bit more. Christ, same page, same chapter. Christ's agony did not cease during that time, but his depression, so I just took a few paragraphs within the chapter. It speaks about his agony. But his depression and discouragement left him. The storm had in no wise abated, but he who was its object was strengthened to meet its fury. He came forth calm and serene, a heavenly peace resting upon his blood-stained face. He had borne what which no human being could ever be, for he has tasted the suffering of death for every human. How? He tasted the suffering of death. He was still breathing. But here, the LNG he tasted death. And we read in just a few seconds ago, that the eternal, he tasted in its force the separation with his Father. But let me continue reading. It says, God suffered his wrath against transgression to fall on his beloved Son. Who was punishing Jesus? Was it Satan beating him up? Was human beings? No. And we will see that. It was God's wrath fully. And how it manifested, God completely separated himself from Jesus. And that created a very strong and mysterious agony that we cannot comprehend unless you're going to be in the second death. Because it's going to be the same one, right? So, it says, then would the sinner bear who continued in... Sorry, I missed. Jesus was to be crucified for the sins of man. What suffering, then, would the sinner bear who continued in sin? All the impenitent and unbelieving would know a sorrow and misery that language would fail to express. Let me tell you again. Misery that you can never describe, right? With amazement, the angels beheld the infinite love of Jesus, who, suffering the most intense agony of mind and body. You got it? Agony of mind and body. Although in that stage, he thought only of others and encouraged the penitent soul to believe. And now the Lord of glory was dying, a ransom for the race. In yielding up his precious life, Christ was not upheld by triumphant joy. All was oppressive and gloom. It was not the dread of death that waited upon him. It was not the pain and ignominy of the cross that caused his inexpressive agony. Christ was the Prince of sufferers, but his suffering was from a sense of the malignity of sin, a knowledge that through familiarity with evil, men had become blinded to its enormity. Christ saw how deep is the hold of sin upon the human heart, how few would be willing to break from his power. He knew that without help from God, humanity must perish, and so multitude perishing within reach of abundant help. 2 more paragraphs, and we will finish there. Upon Christ as our substitute and surety was laid the iniquity of us all. He was counted as transgressor, that he might redeem us from condemnation of the law. The guilt of every descendant of Adam was pressing upon his heart. The wrath of God against sin, the terrible manifestation of his displeasure. Whose displeasure? God the Father displeasure because of iniquity, filled the soul of his Son with consternation. Oh, my brothers, we are here in this church because we want to have the approval of God. That's what's going to give us joy when the clouds are open and he's coming in the cloud. However, if we're not in that stage, this is going to be our feeling. you will know the wrath of God. Right? Now, all his life, Christ had been publishing to fallen world the good news of the Father's mercy and pardoning love. Salvation for the chief of sinners was his theme. But now, with the terrible weight of guilt he bears, he cannot see the Father's reconciling face. What happened with Jesus during that time? He could not see the Father. The Father was not there. The withdrawal of the divine countenance from the Savior in this hour of supreme anguish pierced his heart with a sorrow that can never be fully understood by men. You know, I'm keep on reading so that I give you because I'm trying to grasp the perspective of that agony. And here, Ellen G. White, between chapter 74 and 78, she goes interchangeably back and forth trying to give us a glimpse of it, right? So great was this agony that his physical pain was hardly felt. Yeah, now let's talk about it. You know, you see Hollywood movies, right? Jesus, Passion of Christ, a lot of beating up. That's all exaggerated. That really meant nothing. Listen, have you ever been in a stage of psychological distress that in your life and somebody try to come and pierce you or do anything? You don't even care. It actually, in fact, doesn't even feel a pain. Jesus, like, I remember as a child I saw the movie, Jesus being pierced, Jesus, you know, Passion of Christ, pam, and it was just like, he didn't even shout. And to me, even though as a child, I was like, wait a second, who in this planet is going to be nailed and not even say, "Aye!" At least one, ow. You know what I'm saying? But no, he was silent. And I was like, he probably was strong or he was acting tough. But now I understand. No, he already, like, the anguish of mind, once he's very strong, whatever is physical becomes less important. So that death of the cross, all that process, that was what the human can behold, but that was not the death that Jesus experienced. In fact, as soon as they put it in the cross, he was almost already dead anyway. And we read it before that he died of a broken heart. Yeah, you see, later on they pierced him. What did it came out? Water. You know, once you have a broken heart syndrome or any congestive form of heart failure, you will build up liquid between the chambers, like in your pleural cavity or within, you know, your heart. Yeah, serous, fibrinous type of liquid can build up, and that's why when they pierce, it's just instead of blood, he had a heart attack. Ellen G. White, we read it. He had a heart attack. That's why, see, the cross was not designed to kill you that quickly. That death was the slowest. It would be dead weeks. You know, that's why that was ignominious. But God didn't last, I don't know, last few hours probably. By the late afternoon, he was completely gone. Because a night before, he saw the real death that God is trying to spare us to see it. Now, let me read one more, and then we will conclude. Say, Satan, with his fierce temptation, wronged the heart of Jesus. The Savior could not see through the portals of the tomb. Hope did not present to him coming from the grave as a conqueror, or tell him of the Father's acceptance of the sacrifice. He feared, Jesus feared, that sin was so offensive to God that their separation would be eternal. Have an idea of this. The Godhead, both God, would be he feared that would happen. That's it. I can't even imagine. Honestly, I you know, I get pure, like itches, like when I like separating Father from the Son eternally. Yeah, that's what was at stake. You have an idea of what it is? Now, I think it's in this chapter, the same sentence. Let me just go there. Christ felt the anguish which the sinner will feel when mercy shall no longer plead to the guilty race. I am scared of this. I honestly am not scared. That's why he said, fear not the one who can kill your body. And so that's not the death you should be scared of, honestly. That can happen at any time. Happy is the one if it happened and you have this hope that God, I have, like Paul, Stephen, and all this. They were being killed, but they're like, God have accepted me. I have God accepted. And they were dying in songs. Because when you already have that peace of mind, whatever happened is, it doesn't matter what they do to your body. It's actually real feeling, right? You will be like, if you could see in the thieves on the cross and Jesus had that peace of mind from God. It didn't work. Just like what happened during the persecution. People were putting in fire, being burnt alive, and they were strong in their faith. You know, we know the story. Yeah. However, if you're not good with God, you'll be the first one shouting. You'll be like, oh, no, you know, all these things. So, and I remember one day I was talking to my wife. I said, what do you think is going to happen in the day of the judgment when Jesus comes? What do you think is going to make, if we don't make it to heaven, do you think it's the fire, lake of fire that is going to be scary? Do you think it's the nature being all the thunders and this? No, it's the perception, the conscious perception. As we read, there's a lot of things that I jumped, but the conscious perception of what you lost and the realization of what sin is. You see what did to Jesus? It will do exactly the same to you and me if we don't really pay attention to what is really necessary, right? So, death. Yes, we're all going to die. Some of us probably will not die. We're at the end of the time. I don't know. Jesus said so. Many people will not experience death. So, you shall surely die was not mentioning the death that we used to. That's why Jesus was able to just, don't worry about it. Lazarus is asleep. And maybe just a quick, just to help us because there's a lot of current philosophical teachings that, life after death, rest in peace, and blah, blah, blah. I didn't want to get into that, but let me just think with you a little bit. Jesus resurrected who? Lazarus, right? Imagine, like, if when you die, you go to heaven and you're living a good life, would you like somebody to come and bother you? Like, come back to earth to die again? And no, just think, like, I don't like, I remember when I was doing my PhD, like, having back and forth debate with my supervisors, and I'm like, certain things are just common sense. Like, if I was Lazarus, I'd be mad with Jesus. I'm already, if there's life after death and we believe that life is better than earth, I'm in there. Jesus, I mean, you God, but I'm not trying to come back. Leave me alone. And he resurrected a lot of people, so definitely there's nothing outside there. And obviously, he clearly say it's like sleeping, and we all sleep. You know what happened when you sleep. Did you know what happened last night, the last 8 hours? No. Maybe you had a dream, but you were completely gone. Complete cessation of consciousness. Brain activity is flat, right? So the difference is this sleep is a short period of sleep. The sleep of death that happened in most of our beloved is a little prolonged. But also another thing I want us to think is like this. How this first death is not that important. It's like, what happened after that? As soon as death is ended, when you wake up, you will only face two things. Either you will face the approval of God, or you will face the condemnation of God. You know what I'm saying? So, and obviously, and also, what is the point of resurrecting? If he is a sinner, he's died already. If death is the worst, the ultimate punishment, he's already dead. Why you resurrect him again? You know what I'm saying? If unless what Jesus is really meaning is like, you need, even though you're dead, God's mercy is, you know, God is still there, but God is not completely separated from you. Adam tried to do that. Adam decided that, hey, I love Eve more than you, God. I can't be separated from you. That was death. That was death sentence. But God is so nice. He's like, no, I'm still going to come after you, and because you can't live without me. Today we try to do the same thing. We're trying to be independent. No, we don't need God's commandment. Again, it's death. So, yeah, there was a lot to talk about this topic, but I just want us to meditate that this life is just an experiment for what a real life God has prepared ahead of us. And that's all I had to share with you guys today, and thank you so much.